And now for our picture of the week, I have the women's softball team, which won the NAIA college championship. So my congratulations go out to them. And one young woman was in one of my classes during this championship run, and she played shortstop and hit a grand slam home run that won the championship game. And I asked her, how did it feel to do all that? And she said it was like living a dream. So congratulations to all of them. And you may be wondering how this person could be in one of my classes. I also teach finance in the undergraduate section of the university every so often. So that's the story. This week, the assigned textbook readings come from Advanced Business Law, Chapter 24, Read Only, Section 24.5, the Foundations of Business Law text, Chapter 27, and the Business Ethics Workshop, Chapter 24. And make sure you look at the weekly overview for all of the assignments. In section 24.5, we're going to look at some of the environmental law. And a lot of this is coming out of the 70s and was kind of adapted over the course of the year. You can see the National Environmental Policy Act in 1990, and that allowed for environmental impact statements. And the EPA was specifically formed in 1970s, and many states now have a state EPA, but the EPA's mission was further defined by the 1990 NEPA Act. Coming out of the period of time that I'm describing in the 70s was the Clean Water Act, and you can see there some of the requirements of the Clean Water Act, and then we had the Clean Air Act. And sort of interesting with a lot of these policies is there's really two standards, the standard for humans and then everything else, whether it be animals or plants or resources. We first look at how do these laws provide for the benefit of human beings. And then also states receive the duties of implementing all these standards and these laws. And many of the states, I think if not all, now have a state EPA that manages this for them. Looking at the whole thing, a permit shield is something that I think you need to be aware of, is that if you're operating under the standards and regulations of your permit, let's say you're an industry releasing air pollution, you have to have a permit on how much you can release and what actions you're going to take to mitigate your release. As long as you're operating within the standards, you cannot be prosecuted or held legally liable for any violation above and beyond, unless it can be proved you did that willingly and maliciously outside of your permit. And then the Resource Conservation Recovery Act, called RCRA, is a primarily solid waste and dumping act. And later on in my announcements, I'll be talking to you more about some of the specific experiences I've had with RCRA, being a CEO, mayor of municipal corporation, we had some landfills that we were responsible for, and so I have some very detailed knowledge of RCRA. And then CERCLA is the next one, and CERCLA primarily establishes Superfund sites and how to pay for it, who's going to pay for it, and then as a result of this period of time in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, there's also rules on pesticides and radiation and toxic substances and such. Good issues to know in case you run in to these type of situations, and you'll be surprised how often you do run into these type of situations. As I have said before, cases are optional. If you see something in there that you want to read, by all means, go ahead and do that. In Chapter 27 of the Foundations of Business Law, we started looking at unfair trade practices and the Federal Trade Commission. And the Federal Trade Commission was established by legislation from 1912. And since then, it's grown and modified itself quite a bit with different legislation over the years. And one of the primary things it can do is create TRRs, which are trade regulation rules, and just come up with different things that help the consumer, and they're just a detailed statement of do's and don'ts. And if you look at figure 27.1, gives you a good idea of all the different things the Federal Trade Commission Act allows the Federal Trade Commission to do. Deceptive acts and practices, you can see there's all sorts of different items in that theme, and many of them you might have seen or experienced yourself. For example, product comparisons and disparagement. Every time you go into the grocery store anymore, you see, okay, this is our price, this is the price of these two other local stores, so we are the better price. Well, that's allowed, provided it's accurate, and the Federal Trade Commission makes sure that it's accurate, and if it's not, then that's an unfair practice. And the thing to remember here is truth is the ultimate defense. So if you're going to make a statement or do a practice of any kind, make sure it is true, and you won't run into any type of product issues with the Federal Trade Commission. And then looking at those unfair trade practices, you can see there the variety of different items that are considered unfair trade practices that the Federal Trade Commission does look at. And their remedies, they can file suit against the company. They can require corrective advertising. And, you as an individual can file suit or within a class action suit. And you see a lot of class action suits these days about potential price fixing, or someone saying that their price was lower based on this, or their product was better based on this. And there are quite a few class action suits that have been won by the class in a variety of lawsuits over the past 10, 15, 20 years. So it is, class action suits are becoming more and more popular to solve some of these problems. I included this chapter in the Business Ethics Workshop, Chapter 14, as a supplement to what we were talking about and looking at in Advanced Business Law, Chapter 24, Section 24.5, about some of the regulations um, for protecting the environment, just because this has a really nice look at sort of a case study about Cancun, Mexico. And some of the things that you should consider is that whole idea of domination and progress versus social fairness. Domination and progress is basically, hey, we can use the environment and the resources in whatever manner we choose to because we can. And then look at the whole issue of social fairness. Is this fair to everyone concerned, including the natural resources, the species that inhabit the resource, etc. And then there's also the whole issue of, okay, if we do protect the environment with all these rules and regulations, who should pay? And it comes down to those who contaminated, those who enjoy it, those who are most able, or some combination of those three. And in any type of resource management and environmental management, it's some combination of those three broad areas. And when you look at environmental protection, there's sort of three themes. The progressive approach: is there any other way we can do this? Let's say if we need power rather than a coal-fired plant, why don't we use solar or wind or geothermal or something like that? And then there's a cost-benefit analysis idea, which is basically is, okay, if we can get more value, and however you define value, out of this process or product or whatever, then it costs, to the environment, maybe it's a good thing. And that's kind of going away now. That type of cost-benefit analysis is going away to more of the CSR, the corporate social responsibility, saying organizations have a responsibility to their stakeholders and to everyone throughout the world to do the right thing. An example of some of the changing views is that issue on animal rights. Many people may have heard the story that when they filmed the movie Ben-Hur, that several horses were killed in the filming of the chariot scene, and people at that time said, oh well, that's just the cost of doing business. And nowadays, in the film industry, you always see the caption saying this production was monitored by the ASPCA, or that no animals were harmed during the filming of this title. So keep that in mind. It's ever changing and will continue to change as we become more attuned to what our actions are doing to damage or tear down the natural environment. So take a look at everything in this, and please understand the laws are changing and ethical viewpoints are changing, mostly for the better, but you do need to know both the ethics and the laws behind not only environmental protection, but also fair trade practices. And take notice that Greta Thunberg is Time Magazine's Person of the Year, a young environmental activist. She's, I believe, 16. It's a very, very young person who's making a case for environmental concerns. This is our last week, so stay current with the assignments and make sure you know all the due dates for the final research paper and any quizzes or any other information that you need to turn in.